Hello, everybody. My name is Nate Swick. I am the host of the American Birding Podcast, and I do digital communications here at the ABA. And I'm joined, as I am every couple weeks or so, by our friend Greg Neise. Greg, how are you doing? Are you ready to talk birds with us?
Hello, ready to talk birds with you.
So, folks, as typical, we're excited to see everybody here. If you have any questions about birds, bird ID, bird anything, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and we'll try and hit them as we go. I am really excited for fall migration. It is my favorite time of year. It's my favorite migration. I think it's much better than spring, and I will fight you on that because it is slower. There are more birds. But here in the southeast part of the United States where I live here in North Carolina, it is really, really coming along slowly because I went
No,
out this morning and there's no hot and humid and there's almost
they'll have to
no.
fight both of us
Yeah.
because we have a cold front coming through that's going to pass over the Great Lakes tonight. And like I wrote a friend of mine, I'm like a 10-year-old girl with tickets to a Jonas concert.
Yeah.
It's just like, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring me 60s and northwest winds right
I'm
now.
certainly ready for it. It is so freaking humid here in the southeast. And as I said, I went out this morning and there are more bugs than birds. I don't even have the traditional early fall migrants like American redstart and things like that yet, which I'm sure breed in the area too. But it is slow going. I feel like a birder in late March, when you really know that the best of it is still a couple weeks away, but you're really, really ready for it. It's been a long summer, as I'm sure a lot of people watching can attest. Not just because of, for every reason. There's been a lot of reasons. It's been a very long summer. And I'm definitely ready for fall. Hello, everybody in the chat. We're excited to have you here. Once again, if you have any questions about birds or birding, please let us know. We have some images that I have pulled from our What's This Bird Facebook group. There are some interesting things that I think are pretty typical of bird identification problems that you might run into in the fall. So we're going to look at some shorebirds, some flycatchers, some fall warblers. So I hope you're ready to pour over some really difficult. A couple of them are kind of difficult images.
Yeah.
But we do have one question in the Facebook comments that we might as well go to right now. It's from Ann Pettigrew. She asks, since cowbird chicks are raised by other species, how do they know they are cowbirds? That's a great question.
Oh, they look in the mirror.
They look, yeah. Eventually, they figure it out.
Eventually.
Yeah, so cowbirds are funny in the sense that, for a lot of reasons, actually pretty amazing. And one of the reasons is that they're kind of cowbird being, their internal cowbirdness is written deep down in their DNA. It is core. It is something that is not learned. A lot of aspects of passerine behavior are learned. A lot of birds, especially, they learn their songs from the birds that kind of sing around them and they imprint on, and that's how we get kind of local bird dialects and things of that nature. But cowbirds are completely different in that there's a moment when a cowbird fledge, when it leaves its adoptive parents, when it just sort of realizes that it's a cowbird and not a cardinal or a thrasher or whatever.
It is written to ram.
It is written. Yeah, it's deep in there. Which is pretty impressive, and I think that's the case with a lot of those brood parasites like cuckoos in a lot of parts of the world as well. A lot of that stuff is genetically core stuff that they couldn't change if they wanted to. Not that they birds have those sorts of feelings. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Cowbirds are pretty remarkable because of that
in a lot of ways,
reasons. And they get such a bad rap. It's really unfortunate. So enjoy your cowbirds.
I mean, if you do a little studying about cowbirds and then imagine back to Western colonization of North America, and imagine cowbirds following the bison around and dropping eggs as they go, and their main lifestyle is following bison around, kind of sheds a new light on what cowbirds are all about.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable adaptation that unfortunately kind of gets wired in bad ways when we have these sort of situations like with Kirtland's warbler, or jack pine warbler as I would prefer to call it. that's not a question. That's not an issue with cowbirds. That's more of an issue with the habitat that Kirtland's warbler needs is so few anymore. I mean, there's so little of it anymore that, the cowbirds are, when they take their certain number of Kirtland's warblers' nests, the Kirtland warbler's population is not really able to react to that. It's not a fault of the cowbirds or anything. It's just the fact that, there's not enough Kirtland's warbler habitat out there. Jason Ward says, Team Cowbird. I know you're a cowbird fan, Jason.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd stop by. All right, so Greg, shall we go ahead and throw ourselves?
That's what they should. They should. Yeah, let's dig into this.
All right,
did I startle you with that?
No, I like your voice was like you kind of frizzled out on me with some internet issues.
Sorry.
There. No. It's I blame the internet. I blame. Yeah.
I blame homes. I blame the people trying to do their school.
My kids aren't even home today. They went camping with their grandparents, so I got no excuses.
Messing up our live video feed, kids. Go outside
All right.
and play.
So this is a flycatcher. Yeah, someone just said on the Twitter that it froze up. So maybe it was a feed issue, but I think we're back on track now. So I've got this picture of flycatchers. Well, this is actually the same flycatcher as far as I can tell, from Omaha, Nebraska. And this is a great time of year to really pay attention to those flycatchers because the first, boreal breeding Impinax flycatchers, we do have an Impinax flycatcher on here that I'll show you later, starting to come back south. I know that we're starting to get some reports of those things in my state of North Carolina. But this is a very common one that can cause some problems because you're looking for something else. Greg, what are we looking at this on this bird?
Very plain. And that's for a flycatcher. Flycatchers, unless you start hitting the tropics, for the most part, are pretty plain birds. And this bird is just a basic olive drab bird. And look at the face and how dark and plain the face is. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's maybe, like a hint of an eye ring, but it's so subtle, like to be almost non-existent. The only other thing that really stands out on this bird as far as color or pattern are the wing bars. And the wing bars are noticeable. And there's two of them, and they're of equal prominence, equal brightness. Now let's look at this bird structurally. And it's long and kind of lanky. It's got long wings. Look at how long that in the picture.
It's got a real thin
right,
waist.
Thin waist and long primaries and a long tail, little crest. All of that adds up to an eastern wood peewee.
Indeed, eastern wood peewee. Yeah, this is one that a lot of people, there's people talk about Impinax flycatchers as sort of difficult birds, and they are. And we'll talk a little bit about one that I'm not exactly sure that we can identify a little bit later. But yeah, the first thing you want to do when you see kind of this plain flycatcher is establish it to genus. So Impinax flycatchers, and this is a peewee, which is in the genus Contupus. And these Contupus flycatchers, as Greg points out, are kind of lankier, real long, especially in the wings, kind of that big prominent tail, and they don't have much of an eye ring, although there are some impids that don't have much of an eye ring too. Yeah, I mean, they just feel bigger, and those long wings. I mean, you can see it in that picture on the right. You can see how long that wing is, how it stretches down almost to the midpoint of the tail. There are very few impids that are going to show a wing that long, and that's what we call when we talk about primary projection. If you've heard that term, that is how far the primaries, which is the outer wing feathers, project beyond the kind of shelf of feathers on the wrist.
Right, the wing panel, if you will. And so one other thing to keep in mind when getting to know these birds, or any birds, is when we talk about things like long primary, primary projection and things like that. The peewees, eastern wood peewee, is a long distance migrant. This bird goes all the way to South America and comes all the way back. It's a tropical flycatcher that summers in North America. And if you compare that, and I don't have a comparison photo, but if you look at photos, or if you're familiar with eastern phoebe, which is a very similar looking bird, that is a short distant migrant that really never leaves, the United States, the southern United States. It might go down into Mexico a bit, and the Caribbean, but it doesn't migrate very far, and it has shorter wings.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kinds of things to keep, kind of tucked back there in your head. And then one other point about this bird is getting a little deep in the weeds is that the two wing bars.
Watch out for ticks.
In the fall in particular, in Western wood peewee, which is virtually identical,
very
and
similar.
Common wisdom would say you can only identify them by voice. Well, voice is the clincher, but watch those peewees. If you see one, the Western wood peewee has the upper wing bar is not as prominent. It's not as bright as the lower wing bar. And it typically has an all dark bill, and it's just a little darker overall.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to tell, but yeah, it's definitely a time to kind of keep an eye out for things that look maybe a little bit off if you're interested in that sort of thing. So Peewee, and as Greg says, that sort of long wing versus short wing thing is something that you see in a lot of maybe difficult species groups that have like long distance migrants and short distance migrants that are very similar in other respects. Like I'm thinking like Tennessee Warbler versus Orange-crowned Warbler. Tennessee Warbler, real long wings, almost looks real pointy. The long distance sandpipers like Bairds and White-rumped versus semi-palmated and Western. Real long wings on the first two, almost to the point where they cross in the back. Pointy. These are long distance migrants. They've got to have long wings to make that flight easier. So
and another one that doesn't immediately come to mind very often is housefinch and purplefinch. Purplefinch moves around. It's a migrant. It's a wandering bird, and it has fairly long wings, whereas housefinch is very sedentary and has very short wings. And especially if you see the bird from behind, it's quite noticeable.
Yeah, and I have a question from Periscope from Brant Shurin B1. Do the smeary undertails separate it from Impinax like willow flycatcher? I think that's a peewee thing as well. I usually when I'm looking at peewees, usually the kind of the structure of the bird stands out more to me than that. But if you've got some that are kind of close, I wouldn't use that as like your first field mark, but it's definitely like another one that you want to check when you're trying to identify that bird, and the other ones don't quite make sense, or you don't see them very well.
And one other thing also about the Canopus flycatchers is they have ridiculously small feet.
Oh, really?
They do. I mean, if you look at them compared to other flycatchers, they have small feet.
Yeah. So Eastern wood peewee, Western wood peewee, a lot of the field marks that we've stated here are pretty similar to Western wood peewee as well, if you're trying to identify it from some of the Western impids. Let's move on to the next photo, which is a bird from Wyoming. And I love this image because these two photos are of the same individual bird, but it goes to show you how how slightly different camera settings can make the bird look quite different, because what we're looking at here is obviously the photo on the right is a lot more saturated, so the greens are a lot kind of more yellowy, and you can see how that makes the bird look slightly different. I mean, on the left photo it's kind of more obviously very yellow, but it's sort of a gray kind of dull yellow, whereas the one on the right is like really bright. So that's the same bird, photos taken almost simultaneously, but they look very different because of the settings on the camera.
And it's warmer. The overall color and tone is warmer. And it'll give you, especially the picture on the right will give you a very misleading first impression because of those warm tones and kind of the position the bird's in. So you wouldn't be laughed at if your first impression was female common yellowthroat for this bird.
Yeah, absolutely.
But especially looking at the first picture, you see a few things. The structure's a bit off, especially the tail. The tail is short.
Yellowthroat is a very kind of long warbler. Yeah,
and it has black feet, and a yellowthroat has big pink feet. So this is a yellow warbler.
Yeah, capital yellow, capital warbler.
Yes,
it's also a lowercase yellow, lowercase warbler. There's a lot of other of those though. But yeah, yellow warbler. One of the more common warblers across the continent, especially in the western half of the continent. It seems like there's a lot more yellow warblers over there than there are like where I am, for
Yeah.
instance.
Except Ohio. Ohio is
Ohio.
like the
Yeah, they
northern
call
Ohio is the epicenter of yellow warblers.
yeah, they call Maggie Marsh or McGee Marsh the warbler capital of the world. I think it would probably be more accurate to say that it is the yellow warbler capital of the world because those things are everywhere
Yeah.
there.
And something to remember too is juvenile warblers, especially like yellow is one that really misleads people because the juvenile plumages are very different from what the field guides represent as fall or immature.
Yeah, and that's
Yellow warblers are gray.
Yeah, that's a fall thing, right? Because at least half, if not more, of the birds that we see migrating south this time of year are these juvenile, these first-year birds coming south with their parents. I'd say that there's a lot of those right now. And yeah, so when you're looking at it like a potential juvenile or a young yellow warbler, the structure is going to be the thing that really stands out. And that's what you can see in both of these images. It's kind of a fat, short warbler. You can see the eye ring. The eye ring is going to be there all the time. And nothing much else going on. I mean, it's pretty much when they say yellow warbler, that's an appropriate name. It is the yellowest warbler, like front to back, top to bottom, all the way through.
So speaking of juvenile warbler plumage, most warblers have a juvenile plumage that they molt out of on the breeding grounds before they start moving around. And that juvenile plumage is very, very different from what you see
it's very streaky.
Illustrated in the field guides.
Most of the time, they don't even illustrate it in the field marks because
they
guides,
don't. That's what I'm saying. They don't. Most of them don't. Sibley does a few, like yellow rumped.
Yeah.
But when you're done here, scratch down, or I'll put in the notes down here, aba.org/identification, and there is a feature-length article there that you can check out that's all about juvenile warbler plumage. If you haven't seen that before or you're unfamiliar with it, prepare to have your mind blown, because the birds you're familiar with, like black-poll warbler and bay-breasted and palm and yellow-rumped, don't look anything like what you would expect in juvenile plumage.
Yeah, and it's a good time to sort of clarify what we mean when we talk about juvenile plumage too, because juvenile plumage is one of those terms that is kind of frequently misused a lot of times, and then it can be kind of a gatekeep. People are like, oh, that's not juvenile plumage, that's immature plumage or first year or whatever. So juvenile plumage is a specific term. It's the first set of feathers that a bird has after its downy feathers. So when it leaves the nest, fledgling bird has juvenile feathers. For a lot of these warblers, as Greg said before, they molt before they leave. So on their fall migration, that's not their juvenile plumage. That's actually like their first fall plumage or whatever.
Yeah, immature,
subadult, whatever you want to use. All those terms can kind of be interchangeable. But yeah, those are things that you definitely want to think about. I don't like using juvenile plumage just for that purpose, because it can be very confusing. And so immature is probably a better thing to use when you're talking about these young birds, these first year birds that hatched this past summer. Just some jargon, some bird jargon. We have a question on
throw out the bird jargon.
There's a lot of bird jargon. We have a question from Bonnie the Bird on Periscope. What is coming through Michigan right now? It is so hard to ID the little ones way up in the trees. It is confusing. I feel you. I feel for you, Bonnie.
Wait till Sunday.
Yeah. It can be confusing, but it is also a lot of fun. And, I talked about this on the podcast the other day, this idea that I think Roger Tory Peterson might have ruined an entire generation of birds by calling all the fall warblers confusing. When the fact of the matter is, some of them are difficult. Like I'll say some of them are legitimately tough, but most of their fall plumage is like a washed out version of their spring plumage. So if you can get a decent look, then you can identify, I would say, most of the fall warblers that are coming through. Now, getting a decent look, that's kind of the rub, right? That can be hard, and that just takes practice, repetition. Keep getting those binocular reps.
But one thing about, in the fall, birds tend to linger. They tend to just hang. So, if you have a park that has a bunch of birds in it and you don't have a big weather system moving through, it's very likely that those birds are going to hang around. And if you have the opportunity, you can spend some time with them and get to know them.
Yeah, and a great thing to do in the fall is look for the food source, because that's kind of what's driving the birds right now. So any sort of fruiting tree that has berries. In the eastern part of the U.S. where I live, dogwood and redbud are like bird magnets.
And
A lot of
splashy
times.
water.
Yeah, splashy water. A lot of the trees that have bugs flying around them because they have fruiting berries or whatever also attract a lot of birds. So find that food, and then a lot of times you can kind of observe those birds at your leisure.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing about field guides, and you mentioned Peterson, and that's what I grew up with, and it was all about learning pattern. So he painted all of the warblers like they were for a cookie cutter, and then just painted the different patterns on the birds, and you learned the patterns. And Sibley took that in a more correct direction, and I you understand why Peterson did it that way, but Sibley painted the birds as they appear in life. Their shapes, they're not the same shape.
Yeah.
A prothonotary warbler is not the same shape as a yellow warbler, as a black and white warbler, and they don't behave the same way, and they just don't look the same in the field. Yeah. It's not the same bird with different patterns stamped on it.
Yeah.
And that getting the gist of the bird is really important.
Yeah, I've heard those sort of things referred to as like soft field marks, rather than the field marks that are actually on the bird, but things that are sort of around the bird that you can take notice of when you're observing it. Its behavior, where it prefers to be in a tree, what time of year it comes through, which is a huge useful tool, especially in the fall. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but things like Tennessee versus orange-crowned. I mean, those two come through at completely different times of year, so that it takes a lot of the guesswork out if you see one of those birds. But yeah, the other things to kind of think about more than just the classic field marks that you see in your guide.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next one. Let's keep talking flycatchers, Greg. This one's from East Tennessee. This is late August. So Appalachian Mountain, a lot of birds use the Appalachians as kind of a loose map to kind of go down. So fall migration in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina is really great. So this is obviously another flycatcher. Why is it not a Peewee?
Well, it's got a nice bold eye ring.
That helps.
And the bird, the picture on the left, you can see it's got this big eye and a big eye ring. The face is not as plain and dark. If in the field this bird is smaller, and look at the size of the feet. It's got kind of big feet,
long legs
compared to the Peewee. And it's got short primary projection. If we look at the primary sticking out,
right photo,
on the right photo, you can see the primary feathers that only stick out a short way compared to the rest of the wing panel.
Yeah, they don't even get to the base of the bill or base of the tail rather in some of those of these birds.
Yep.
Yeah. So more green than brown too.
Yeah. So what? I would call this a least flycatcher.
All right.
But if somebody wanted to call it an alder,
yeah, right. That's what's your. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I put this on here, and I wasn't exactly sure. This is the sort of thing that I would really like to see. Although, Greg, it's clearly in a willow tree, so obviously it's.
Well, there we go.
Identified.
Well, let's just shut this down.
Shut it down. So it's as Greg said, Empid is great. Least. I could feel at least a little bit in this bird, especially, least is one of those ones that they have a very big eye and a very cute face. More so than others. Admittedly, that's a very subjective thing, and it takes looking at a lot of Impinax Flycatchers to sort of get a feel for it, or just going to eBird and putting up all the images of least flycatchers and taking a look at them. But yeah, big eye, short bill, very short wings. Yeah, I could feel least on this one. I was feeling a little trailsy as well, but I think you may have.
Well, like I said, if this bird called and it turned out to be an alder, I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
Identifying birds like this from still photos, especially only one or two, is quite difficult. But what sticks out here is this, especially both photos, but especially the one on the left. It just has that big-headed look.
Yeah, big
head,
big eye.
flycatcher. Alder tends to look more compact, maybe a little more crested, A little, and there's a little more. It just doesn't look quite like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll say that when I see lease and fall migration, and this is where like seeing the habitat and where you see it would be very useful. Is I often think of them as very much as like very shrubby kind of willow groves, although it looks like it's in a willow grove thing, but like pretty low down. Whereas willow / alder, which is what we call trails flycatcher,
Right.
sometimes is a little bit higher and kind of older forests and whatnot. Although as far as habitat goes and migration, anything can go, but that's sort of my general sense, especially where I live, when I see leases.
Jim Eager says hi from the Space Coast Birding and Wildlife Festival. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Space Coast. Unfortunately, they had to cancel for next winter, which looks like an incredibly prescient decision at this point, even though they did it very early. Hope to see all the folks down at Space Coast again in the not too distant future. Hope they're all taken care of. It's a great festival, great part of the world.
Absolutely. I've had some really good fun and really good birding down there.
Yeah, it's hard not to have good birding in Florida. Jenny Shockley says she hasn't learned all of the migration patterns yet, so she uses What's This Bird to alert you to what is on the way. Once you start seeing them in New Jersey, I know to keep an eye out. Yeah, that's how I use it a lot too. It is sort of fascinating when you're watching What's This Bird. I know Greg and I have been watching it for as long as we've had it. Like, you see people having the same sorts of identification questions at around the same time every year. So you definitely do get a sense of status and distribution just from watching What's This Bird. It's actually one of the low-key, more interesting aspects of that group.
Yep.
So yeah, if you're watching us on YouTube or watching this on Twitter and you're not on Facebook, I don't necessarily blame you for that. But we do have a really great group called What's This Bird. Check it out, join it, and we basically crowdsource bird identifications. It's
and I believe that you can. It's facebook.com/whatsthisbird. You don't have to be a Facebook member to look at it and just check out what's going on. You can just click on over and take a peek.
Yeah. So we're going to keep moving through these images, these photos that have been posted to our What's This Bird group. If you have any questions specifically about birds or bird ID, please let us know in the comments. We'll be happy to answer those and take them as they come. We certainly enjoy interacting with y'all as we go through this. Let's go to the next one. I was talking about warblers. A lot of warblers coming through right now. This is one from Vermont, so this will be one of the first warblers coming through. Couple things going on in this photo. I think it's a little saturated, so I'm not sure that the bird is quite as yellow as it appears. I think there's some reflection off these very green leaves going on. But what do you see on this bird here, Greg?
Well, the first thing I see is, like you said, I see a lot of saturation, and the yellow isn't. It's the yes, there's a lot of yellow underneath, but the yellow is an odd color that is not the actual pigment color of almost any warbler that is truly yellow underneath.
It's kind of limey.
And if you, if your first impression looking at this bird was one of the birds that's really yellow underneath, you wouldn't, we wouldn't think badly of you. But that dark line through the eye. So you've got the supercilium, which is the pale line over the eye, and then you've got the line through the eye. So you've got the lores, and then the postocular little line there. I don't see any wing bars on this bird.
Don't see any wings on this bird.
Yeah, I can't see any wings on this bird.
Covered by that.
But
leaf.
This is a fall Tennessee warbler.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. And, I talked a little bit about status and distribution and knowing when birds come through. Tennessee is a mid-September warbler migrant, at least where I live in the southeast. So, back it up just a little bit as you go up the coast. But they are definitely moving now. They're going to be moving a lot in another week or so. And there'll be a lot of Tennessee warblers coming by. It's usually, so this is one of the couple species pairs that can be kind of tough that might legitimately be called confusing fall warblers. But, Jared Clark mentioned it probably should be called Vermont warbler. It's definitely probably a better name than Tennessee warbler. I don't know there are too many in Tennessee right now. But Orange-crowned warbler is very similar, same genus as Tennessee warbler, usually put up as a difficult species pair, and sometimes really faded birds or very yellow. First-year Tennessee warblers can look very much like a orange-crowned warbler, but I always think of orange-crowned as a very, very late warbler. In fact, they overwinter in the southern part of the United States, and so we usually don't see them start coming in until like October, like kind of later, even on the late end of October. And Tennessees are September birds, so like there's a switch. You usually don't see them coming through, at least my area, at the same time. So that's a useful thing to kind of think about when you're seeing a bird like this. I don't know how it is in Chicago. Do you guys get them at the same time, or is it similar sort of thing?
No, it's the same. It's pretty much the same. I mean, we get because of the lake, we get a lot of lingering birds. So but no, the general pattern is pretty much what you said.
Yeah. So definitely keep that in mind. If I see a bird like that now, I would say it would be a Tennessee warbler, even if it was sort of a confusing one, unless I saw other reason not to. And likewise, if I saw one of these that looks similar to this in October, I'd probably immediately think orange-crowned, unless I had reason to think otherwise. Although this is a pretty clear-cut Tennessee, I think.
Yeah, I mean the face pattern on this bird is pretty clear cut. I mean you won't see the two eye stripes, eye lines on orange crowned. It tends to have eye arc, more of an eye arcs and not this sort of double black and white line through the eye, over the eye.
And they tend to be like much more uniform in color too. Like the color on like the back of the neck or the crown is very similar to what you'd see like on the front of the bird as well. Whereas Tennessee, you see a little more difference between those two. Yeah. Even in one that is oversaturated like this. Yep. All right, let's talk shorebirds. We got the shorebird from Bayonne, New Jersey. Things that I am looking at on this bird. What do the legs look like to you, Greg?
They look black.
They look dark to me. That's what I was thinking as well. It's got a nice little cap here. It's got a nice scaly back with maybe a hint of red, kind of rusty on the top. Got the hinge of the wing. And kind of a longer bill. This one kind of looks Western to me. I kind of think Western. Unless you've got other reason to...
Well, I mean, I see what you're seeing. I could go big build semi-palmated on this bird.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm seeing
it's tough. It's not quite as bright as I would.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking. I see that rusty on the tertials, the kind of the back feathers that kind of go into the wing there. And I don't know that it's definitely not that really clear chestnut slash that you see in a lot of really fresh Western sandpipers. Yeah. But I'd like to see this bird moving.
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to see more pictures of it.
Yeah, this was the only one. Because when I see semi-palm versus Western, a lot of times they have a very different way of foraging. So Western is a reacher. So they have kind of a longer bill and they kind of stretch that neck out and reach way out to grab things, whereas semi-palm will kind of stay a little bit closer to the front. But this is in one of those postures that could go either way, to be honest.
Yeah, and looking at the fine points of this bird, the first thing I'm looking at after I've determined that it's got dark legs, I'm looking at the bill, the bill structure, and it looks to me in this photo that it has semi-palmated has kind of a wider tip to the bill. It's almost got like a little bulbous tip to the bill.
Yeah.
And I think I see that, but the angle and so on is that you're not 100% sure. And could that be a little dip, or am I actually seeing the little bit of bulbous on the bill?
Mm-hmm. I see what you're talking about.
Is it mud?
Right. The big question. The big question you should always ask when you're looking at shorebirds: is it mud?
Is it mud?
It goes for bill. It goes for legs. It goes for everything. Yep. Is it mud? Yeah. Jared Clark notes that a bill like that would stand out as extreme in a flock of semis here. Yeah, but I will say, when I used to work at the museum here, I used to volunteer at the museum here in North Carolina. the State Museum in Raleigh in the bird collections lab. And one time I went to the specimen tray for semi-palmated and Western. And so there's like a tray of semi-palmated, a couple trays of semi-palmated, a couple trays of Western, and then there's another tray that is like all the birds that like they couldn't even identify in the hand. And there are birds like this kind of in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I said, like behavior is a good clue, maybe a better clue than people really maybe realize between, species pairs like Western and semi-palm.
Yep.
So, yeah. Brody Cass Talbot says it would be very bland for the Westerns we're seeing out west. Yeah, I think it is kind of bland for a Western. Yeah. But the bill is also sort of extreme for a semi, so go figure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with scratching your head and just kind of letting it walk away. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Calidra Spa on your eBird checklist, folks.
Yep.
I do have a question on Periscope from Mosey T10. How long should we leave sugar water out for Orioles in southern New Jersey? It's about the same for Orioles as it would be for hummingbirds. I would say probably not more than a week. You don't want it to go bad. If it gets cloudy, then you definitely want to change it. But, sugar water.
I took that question to mean like how late in the year.
Yeah, that's probably, I read that completely wrong.
I would leave
into November.
Personally, I would leave feeders out until they freeze, hummingbirds and Orioles, because in November is when the really exciting stuff might drop in. You might be putting food out there for nothing for weeks.
Bullock's Oriole, hooded Oriole.
But then some Scots or Bullocks or a hummingbird or something will drop in unexpected. And that's where the real fun of backyard feeding is, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you'll even have Baltimore Orioles hanging out pretty late. I mean, we have them all winter here in North Carolina, and the weather in coastal Jersey is not too much different than what we have in, say, the Piedmont of North Carolina a lot of times. So it's pretty moderated. But yeah, I mean, you could have them. I would leave it out. I would leave it out until it freezes, as Greg says. Yeah. Or a week until you change it, whichever way you want to take that question.
Yeah. So. Maybe we can do both.
Yeah, that's right. We'll give you both. 2 for 1. Let's see here. Do we have any other questions? Let me check quick. All right, before we move on.
I don't know. My watch party is a bunch of people watching, but people aren't being very talkative.
No one wants to be talkative.
Nobody's asking anything. Nobody. Yeah. I mean, only one person is actually.
That's very generous of y'all to just assume that everything we say is correct. It's good for our egos. Until Tom Johnson comes along and tells us that we got that thing totally wrong.
It's too bad we can't temporarily block him.
All right, this is one that you sent me, Greg. Yes. This is a good one because this is like one of the classic ID conundrums in North America. This is from Bald Knob, Arkansas.
Confusing birds in North America.
Yep.
And it confuses people more than Impinax Flycatchers, fall warblers, fall shorebirds, because there's not a whole lot of choices for a bird that looks and behaves and is in the habitat that this bird is in.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously not a finch, but what is it? And it's also oh, sorry. I'm going to get back to you, Jim, there. It is also has an incredible breeding. Sorry, stuff that's popping up here just kind of distracted me. Breeding time. So this species is one of the earliest birds to breed in the spring.
Yeah.
You can find fledglings in March in the north, like in places like Illinois and Nebraska and Ohio. You can find fledglings in March, and you can find juveniles like this in September.
Yeah, I love this bird because this is one of the most common birds on the entire continent of North America that is like no one knows about.
Yeah. This is a juvenile, a young horned lark transitioning into adult plumage. You can see on the face you can see that black and yellow pattern starting to come in, but on the side of the bird, on the back, on the scapulars, you can see some of the black and white spotting. It's that spotted plumage that really throws people off.
Yeah, and I like this bird because it's a little further along than we typically see him, so you can start to see the pattern on the face. You're starting to see that kind of classic black mask with the yellow horned lark pattern on the face. Horned lark, great bird. Man, like people don't realize how common they are. Like they are really, like I ran into one last year on my breeding bird survey route here in the Piedmont of North Carolina. And I had no idea they nested anywhere near, but there they were in like this agricultural field with us like nothing else. Yeah, it's a great bird.
Yeah, they will breed out in the ag fields before they get plowed, and they'll get a brood in, and then they'll move somewhere else and they'll breed again. And
yeah, real underrated. And you know they have that tail too. That tail that you can see certainly on the left bird, that black tail with the white outer tail feathers. When they fly, you can see that really well. But yeah, horned lark. Yeah, good bird. That's a good one. And Bald Knob, Arkansas. I don't know where that is. I assume that's kind of up in the Ozarks. That's where everything is a knob. So that's where I grew up, so I could say that. Here's another one that you sent me from Vancouver. Another flycatcher. Okay. You got a flycatcher heavy day.
Yeah. And so looking back, and I think we have, I can't see the photos in real time. Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Look at this bird's shape.
It's got a big old noggin.
Even if it was a silhouette, look at that big old head, and it's got kind of a poofy crest. We can't really see how long the wings are. It's partially blocked by a branch, and it's just dark. But look at it. It's got those little feet, and it's another in the genus Canopus. It's related to the Peewees. Technically, I guess you could say it is a Peewee. It is an olive-sided flycatcher.
Olive-sided flycatcher.
And
I had nothing to say about olive-sided flycatchers. Did you? Oh, you froze up there, Greg. Oh, you froze up there for a second. I was like, it is an olive-sided flycatcher, and then you just stopped, and I was like, am I supposed to jump in here with some olive-sided flycatcher knowledge? Because I don't really have a lot. It's not a bird I see very often.
But if you can move to the next picture.
Oh yeah. Gotcha.
So here is an olive-sided flycatcher on the left, and I think this might be it doesn't matter which Peewee it is, but look at the difference in shape. And like you were saying earlier, Nate, how the Peewee on the right there is more wasted. It's longer tailed. The olive-sided flycatcher has a relatively shorter tail. It's got very, very long wings.
Long migrant.
Looks like a cape from below. And these two birds can be very confusing until you see them like this, and then the shape is really they're very different shapes.
Yeah, olive-sided flycatcher, that's definitely a bird that you in the Midwest and the western part of the continent get to see a lot more often than me. I think I've only seen one like twice in my state. It's still considered a good bird in South Carolina. But
and what? Oh, sorry, I was just saying one other thing about the telling these birds apart is that peewees tend to hunt and to hang out on bare branches in the middle upper level of the trees, but sort of like bare side branches that stick out. Olive-sided flycatcher goes to the highest thing it can find. It goes way up at the tippy top, and it will sit up in the bare branches at the very tip top. And if there's a hill, it'll go up to the top of the hill and then go up to the top of the tallest thing on top of the hill.
Yeah. Quick 3 beers. Love that bird. Yep. Bird after my own heart. But the olive-sided flycatcher, as you say, that wasted look, man, they really have a short tail. It's kind of funny when you think of peewees in general and all those Contupus flycatchers as being kind of very long. Even the ones down into the tropics are sort of very similar shape, whereas olive-sided flycatcher, which could legitimately be called something like boreal peewee, formerly Coues flycatcher, and Yeah, it's very different. Big headed though, man, it is so big headed. That is the first thing that you notice when you see one of those things. Tim Callback notes streakiness in the olive flanks of olive sided is something that he
Yep.
notices, but it almost never on Peewees, and this photo shows it. Yeah, that's a great point. You can even see it in this photo from British Columbia a little bit. You can see it's
Yep.
the flanks on the side are a little more streaky, a little more smudgy, and certainly you can see it on the photo of the composite that you made, Greg. Yeah, so that's the last bird that we have in our slideshow here. If you have any other questions about bird identification, please let us know. We'll be happy to take those. We've been at this for about 47 minutes now.
And if you've been with us for 47 minutes and enjoy these things that we do,
this is where we do the PBS thing.
This is where we do the PBS bit. Get over to aba.org/join and join us. This is what Nate and I do for a living, and everybody at the ABA, we bring you birding content, answer your questions, and generally promote birding and the birding world. And we need your help to do it. So join us and become a participant and a stakeholder.
Absolutely. And we certainly, as you said, aba.org/join. We have a lot of free resources, and if you enjoy those sort of free resources, please consider joining the ABA. That's how we do our thing. We're happy to provide all that stuff, but we can't do it without you, without members.
That is the truth.
Yeah. So thank you. If you have any other questions about birds or birding, we need tote bags. Yeah, we do need some tote bags. Actually, we should go get. We should go to or backpacks or binocular something or others. I don't know. Tote bag's kind of hard to take.
We have binocular straps.
We have a lot of like birding equipment, stuff you can take birding, but we definitely need more equipment that you would take like just out, like not birding. Although, as we all know, you're never not birding. But when you're out getting groceries or something, have the big ABA logo on the side of your bags that you bring to the store. Although, back when you can go to grocery stores again.
So I just got a comment here from Matt Wettrich.
Hey, Matt.
And all right, I'm just going to read this. He says, talk about the idea that winter finches and merlins find their way to cemeteries in the Midwest in the Midwest winter, thanks to the conifers that are often planted there. These tree species are not found throughout the prairie and savanna landscape. Thoughts on if this behavior dates back to prior to glaciation, when coniferous forests were found further south, or if they just happen to get lucky and find these trees as they wander south in search of food for winter survival. Wow, that's a lot to take.
I also, I don't know what I would comment on it that isn't already commented.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of hit it on the head there.
Sounds like an interesting theory. I would totally buy it. I got nothing.
It's common knowledge around here that cemeteries are the best places to look for merlins in the winter.
Huh.
No question. And they do spend the night nestled in conifer limbs. When we have winter finch, especially crossbill invasions, why the cemeteries are just go around, hit all the cemeteries, look for crossbills.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm definitely a fan of birding cemeteries. I think there's something to that. It is so funny that there's good birding to be had in cemeteries all over the continent, all over the world. Some of our best birding locations are cemeteries. So, when I was a kid birder doing one of my first Christmas bird counts, I found one of the best birds of the count at a cemetery. It was a palm warbler, wintering palm warbler.
Yeah, and pretty much all cemeteries. I live. So where I live, I'm kind of on the edge of this big area of cemeteries that are along the Des Plaines River and west of the Des Plaines River, west of Chicago, about 10 miles or so west of Chicago. And the town that's my neighbor here, running joke is that they've got more dead people than live people. And it's true.
It's a Chicago joke in there.
More people buried in Forest Park, Illinois than there are people living there. But every cemetery has in the back a place where they throw brush and stuff. It's like this work area that's overgrown and brushy, and they pile brush back there. And that, when you find that back area where the workmen, they throw everything, that can be a bird magnet.
Yeah, it's definitely very much a Midwestern thing too, I think, because especially places where there aren't a lot of trees. Typically, cemeteries are the places where they have the biggest trees, like the trees that have been left alone for the longest amount of time, and so it makes sense that it would attract a lot of birds. That's less the case here where I live, but when I grew up in Missouri,
and in a huge metro area like Chicago, it's often the only natural habitat. In an area. I mean, the cemeteries we have, in these big cities are often really nicely landscaped.
Spencer England has a question. He says he just got back from working in Alaska on Middleton Island. That sounds great. First time in Alaska, found the challenge with IDing shearwaters to be almost impossible. Any experience with shearwaters, sooty, short-tailed, bullers, flesh-footed, pink-footed Manx with the runs around near the end of the field season? I mean, those shearwaters on the West Coast and the Northern Pacific can be very tough. I'm fortunate here in the east part of the United States, where when we go out of Hatteras, the only shearwaters we have to look for are sooty, which is the dark one, and Corey's, which is the light one. And then Audubon and Manx, which can be a little tougher, but with practice you can get them. But with all those pelagic species, the thing it takes repetition, it takes practice, because a lot of times you can glean a lot of important information from how they fly and how they move and sort of the shape that they are in. I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy. I mean, it certainly takes a lot of practice and time. But that's sort of what you want to look for. You want to get the sense of the jizz, the gestalt of the bird that's moving, to get a good idea. But there's a reason why people who are really good at it seem like it's almost supernatural. Like it's a neat skill.
And that's what I was going to say. If you have the opportunity to get on a boat with people who really know what they're doing, people like Alvaro Jaramillo, or some of the birders on the East Coast, get on a boat with them and just follow along with what they're doing and learn. Looks like we've got Kelly Smith is jumping on here. Now
I think she's just hanging in there so we can keep this conversation so the Zoom doesn't kick us off, is what I think.
Gotcha. Well, anyways, so spend time on a boat with people who really know what they're doing, and you'll start to pick up patterns of how they fly, how they behave.
And sort of now you're the host. Part of the problem with pelagic species is that we get the sort of sense about birds when you see them a lot. Like you can identify maybe a cardinal when it flies into a bush without seeing it very well, or a mockingbird, or a thrasher, or whatever. Like you kind of get a feel for a bird without seeing the relevant field marks. And the problem with pelagic birds is that so few of us are actually out there on the ocean for the long enough time to kind of get that comfort level with them. And
it's tough.
What it takes.
And another thing that makes it hard is that they don't really call, and when they do make noise, they all sound alike.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of and you can't use Lark wire to learn how to identify them by voice. But you can learn other birds with Lark wire, which is the best tool. Go through
an entire What's This Bird Live thing without mentioning
which is the best which is the best tool for learning bird songs is Lark wire. So go to larkwire.com. I don't know how long this joke is going to run, but it's not a joke. Check out Larkwire.
Good. It's a good app.
It is good.
So we're about an hour in. If anyone has any other questions, please let us know in the comments. Otherwise, we're going to start looking to wrap this up a little bit. Spencer says definitely lived in Colorado, first time in Alaska, so it's definitely tough. Had to try an ID from land. Yeah, that makes things even worse. Let's see. When I went to St. Paul Island, and Greg, I know you've been there as well. You can spend a little bit of time sea watching, but typically the tube noses, the things like short-tailed shearwater and maybe the albatrosses, if you're lucky, are really far away. And mottled petrel, and it just requires like certain weather conditions to push them in. But for the most part, you're looking at specks on the edge of your view, and it's really tough. It's hard birding, for sure.
Yeah, and the only one that's even remotely close usually is northern fulmar.
Yeah, exactly.
And you quickly learn to like, okay, it's not a fulmar. Move on.
You have fulmars and not fulmars. That's about all you can do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're at an hour here, so I think we're gonna wrap this up and say goodbye. We'll be back in a couple weeks. You can catch up with us on the What's This Bird Facebook group. Again, if you're interested in joining the ABA, it's aba.org/join. You can check out all of our memberships, even our e-memberships, which is the best way to join if you are someone who does not live in the United States. But let's see, we're finished here. So thanks for everybody for your questions, and thanks for posting those pictures up on What's This Bird for us to take a crack at. You got anything else?
Absolutely. And no, just good talking with you as always, Nate. And we'll see all you guys in a couple of weeks here.
Bye-bye.